topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
What's working on purpose anyway? Each week, we ponder the answer to this question. People ache for meaning and purpose at work, to contribute their talents passionately and know their lives really matter. They crave being part of an organization that inspires them and helps them grow into realizing their highest potential. Business can be such a force for good in the world, elevating humanity. In our program, we provide guidance and inspiration to help usher in this world we all want, working on purpose. Now, here's your host, Dr. Alise Cortez.
Welcome back to the Working on Purpose program. Thanks for tuning in again this week. Great to have you. This show has been on air and brought to you with passion and pride since February of 2015. I'm your host, Dr. Alise Cortez. If you don't know me, we've not met yet before. I'm an organizational psychologist and logotherapist, management consultant, speaker, and author. My team and I at Gusto now help companies to enliven and fortify their operations by articulating their purpose and building inspirational leaders and cultures activated by meaning and purpose to turn those companies from a flatline EKG to a vibrant destination workplace. There, people are intrinsically motivated to perform at their best, can grow into their fuller potential, and are committed to stay and dynamically deliver on the company's mission. You can learn more about us and how we can work together at gusto-now.com and alisecortez.com. Now, getting into today's program, we have with us today Michael Graber. He's the managing partner of Epic Pivot, and he speaks and publishes frequently on innovation, the power of purpose in business, and the positive influence organizations can make on the world. He serves on the advisory board of the Global Institute of Innovation and has been a top 40 global innovation blogger for more than 5 years. He contributes articles to Inc., among other platforms, and is a contributing author to The Other Side of Growth, An Innovator's Responsibilities in an Emerging World. He's also written 2 other interesting books, Going Electric, Tales of Innovation from Where Rock and Roll Was Born, and Last Real Medicine Show. He joins us today from Memphis, Tennessee. Michael, welcome to Working on Purpose.
Thank you, Alise. It's wonderful to be with you.
And I want to thank you for also coming on. I know you're a little bit under the weather, so listeners and viewers, if you hear an occasional snivel or a cough, that's because he's a trooper and he's coming on here, even though he's not quite fully 100%. So thanks for that, Michael.
My pleasure. I apologize about any superfluous noise.
I appreciate it. So let me just hold this up. This is one of the things you've created, put into the world, the other side of growth. This, as I said before we got on air, Michael, I just think it's incredibly timely. I think the world is positioned to be able just to really grab this and receive this in the way that I know you've been putting it out there for decades. And so I'm really grateful that we get to talk about this important topic here. It's just perfect. And we met on LinkedIn and I love what you're doing. So I want to share with my listeners and viewers. So let's start first by just talking a bit about your background and how you got working in purpose and conscious capitalism. That's a path that I recognize, but we all get there by different ways.
That's right. Well, it's an honor to be with you, and I'm so glad our paths crossed. I'll begin just by saying I never expected to work in the world of business. In fact, I was a little allergic to it, although both of my grandfathers had large organizations, large businesses, and I grew up going to them. They were family businesses, so my family's worked in them as well until they sold them off. And then I was more of the artistic type. I have an MFA in poetry and used to teach at the University of Memphis and then also play music. And so it wasn't until something happened during a hiring process at the university when I realized, oh my gosh, these people are backbiting and sniveling and getting very political just over schools of thought about poetry. These politics are going to kill me. And so I did something that was pretty countercultural. I went to work at an advertising firm and a publishing firm and found out there were, believe it or not, many less politics in the world of business in a healthy culture than in some universities. And so I always have considered myself kind of a spy in the house of commerce, to quote Shakespeare. I'm still have these noble aspirations. Things like truth and beauty and meaning and purpose still mean something to me. And I think many of us in our species and our culture and all over the planet are dying for a lack of those things. things. So it was by accident and happenstance. Let's put it that way.
Oh gosh, I'm a meaning and work researcher. I can't tell you how many times I've heard those exact same words used over and over again to describe a path. And I also get delighted when I see people come from very, very different, diverse and dispersive backgrounds and bring that view, that lens into the world of business as only you can. So I'm very happy to have you bring beauty and meaning and purpose, to the world of business. Thank you for that, Michael, in advance. It sounds good to me. And the other thing about you that's quite interesting to me is that you're an innovator. You think about how to create things, how to transform things. And I was very intrigued by one of the articles that you wrote where you quote and cite AccuPoll as saying that more than 95% of the new products fail each year. And you go on to say that this really ought to be a harrowing statistic that should sound an alarm, or one that says we approach the conceptualization and launch of new products in a way that just doesn't work, but yet we keep doing it over and over again.
That's right. And so I can talk for a long time here, so please cut me off or interject a question in the middle of this monologue.
Okay.
But I think it's an important grounding for everything I'm going to say for the remainder of the hour. And that is that in the late 80s, early 90s, we found ourselves in this conundrum where we hit the apex of the Industrial Revolution. Right? We were able to zero defect almost everything, and our operational excellence, not our cultures, but in terms of production, went sky high, right? And so we're able to produce stuff at a rapid rate at which we'd never been able to produce before. And so you hit this conundrum globally. And this conundrum is that you had rising R&D costs, but then at the same time, you were getting flat or less returns. Because the old model used to be you could find some clever people and they could, by instinct or intuition, figure out a hole in the market, go and produce it as quickly as possible, put their profit margin on it and push it out in the market. But then when things got almost too much at scale and too much at a global scale, people just started making things not because they had that intuitive sense of a need in the market, but making things gasp just to make money, believe it or not. Right?
Oh, yeah.
And so everything was surfeited. There was too much. There were too many competitors. Private label came in and just boxed so many large brands out. I'll give an example of that in a minute. And so if we're creating things just to make money without figuring out a real human want, need, desire, a real hole in the marketplace, it's going to end up as part of that 97%, as what I now call bed, death, and beyond, which is like Big Lots or something like that, one of the closeout stores, which there's such an aftermarket for all this waste. And then you have to think about the cost of all those things, all the externalities of manufacturing and shipping all this stuff that nobody really wanted in the first place. And so smart companies started figuring out, and this was written about in the McKinsey study, The Alchemy of Growth, when they looked at what firms were doing that kept rising when so many were just falling off of out of existence. They saw that they were making innovation bets in their core, adjacent, and transformative horizons. But then they were also using human-centered techniques and using an ethnographic primary market approach. So really understanding what people want, how they use things, where there are gaps, and able to create that. So once we're able to start doing that for some of our clients and they're able to see this revolution, they're able to create things that matter and things that can't be copied and things that are protected for a while. So it's no longer a Me Too race to commoditize everything and put everything towards the average, but they're able to really leapfrog and future-proof their businesses as well by using some of these human-centered techniques. My favorite part of doing this work for more than 300 organizations is that the lights go on in people in new ways. They understand that they're wired for empathy. I'll give you one example. We talked about it in our brief pre-call, and this was a lovely man. He was a chemist. He worked at Merck, at Bayer, Shearing Plow, all those places, successive owners, same company. And I had permission to tell this story. He worked on copper tone early and created the SPF, the sunscreen spectrum that we have. He's a renowned chemist.
Okay.
But we were working on an eczema platform. And I took him, I said, I want to work a different way this time, if it's okay with you. And he was very open-minded, open-hearted guy. I said, sure. So small recruits. We started by going 3 homes right in our backyard in Memphis of extreme eczema sufferers whom we'd recruited. We went in their homes. They all showed us the Clorox, the gallon of Clorox next to their bath that they have to put in because they said that this is, quote, a living hell and nobody understands. And they feel isolated from their family, say when they go on vacation and they get a flare up and they have to stay in the hotel room when everyone else goes out at the happiest place on earth. And we went back to the car after the 3rd visit. We had more scheduled for the next day. And he started crying.
Yeah.
I didn't know what to do. I was about 35 at the time. He was a 60-year-old man. And so what is it? He said, I feel like I've wasted my whole career. So what do you mean, Tom? He said, well, before it was always about the science, the chemistry, the formulation. But now I'm on a mission to go help people like Susan inside, who's in there silently suffering right now. And so the more you can tether the product, the service, the experience to the actual people who are going to use them and apply that heart and apply that empathy, the more you're going to hit that target, right? And the more you're going to be useful. It really creates a whole wake of goodwill.
Oh, Michael, and that's why I'm connected with you, and you can't get away from me, because I am a champion of what you're helping organizations to create. And what I want to also put forth for our listeners and viewers to situate why this is so important. As a researcher, I know that increasingly what we see is that people are expecting organizations to do better with themselves, so the resources and how they're creating. So when we know that an organization is putting this kind of thought into how they innovate and market and serve, what that already does is it increases the stickiness and the commitment of their stakeholders, including their customers, their employees, the communities in which they serve. So I wanted to situate that because I know you and I are aligned on that in terms of stakeholder capitalistic approach, but just how, what do I want to say, magnetic that is for organizations to be able to do that. And then they talk about being able to do this and to prospective people that would come into their fold. And then the other thing
so
is,
Alise, if I can even expound a little further,
please.
We worked on all of it. It was Merck Consumer Cares, all of their product platforms. And we knew the revolution was complete when the president of the Consumer Care Division, we had quoted posters. We took posters of people that we did all types of interviews, intercept interviews, recruited interviews, real people from all over the world, right? We traveled widely. And when she quoted the names and stories of some of these people, we put big posters in all the offices. And she said, this is why we're working. This is what we do. People really felt a sense of purpose and meaning. And I'll say that it not only created that kind of goodwill and galvanized the culture and let people work together in different ways, but it also increased the value and valuation for when they sold to Bayer Consumer Care.
Absolutely, Michael. And that was a beautiful example to bring that home. Thank you very much. So everybody, especially when you work for a larger organization and your work becomes more siloed, and it's hard to understand how your individual contribution contributes to the overall purpose of the organization, the mission of the organization through which it's exercised. When you see that kind of thing, now you understand your direct contribution to it, and now you know you individually matter. And that's what everybody wants.
Right. Yeah, very much. Yeah, you and I also discussed the great Google Aristotle project where they decoded the factors of high performance teams. And everyone quotes psychological safety. It's become a bit of a cliche in the consulting industry. We want psychological safety. We need leaders to create cultures that are psychologically safe, which was the foremost tenet of high performance teams. But I always like to quote 3 and 4. So 3 was meaning through our work, and 4 was purpose through our organization. Mm-hmm. So you can't just have that trust, the psychological safety, without really putting, I'll call it the engine of meaning and purpose on it. Because that's what we're hungry for as a species, right? And that's what we're warring about because of the lack of it, whether we're warring in the boardroom or actually warring. But we just can't agree on these things.
hmm Well, like I wrote about in The Great Revitalization, which came out in March 2023, I am fully convinced, based on my research, that part of what happened during the pandemic was it gave people that pause to sit back and really consider, what do I want for my life, my work, and what's working, what am I not willing to put up with anymore. And I think a lot of people's sense of and desire for meaning and purpose got radically elevated during that time. It increased people's hunger for that and an insistence on that in ways that they just were willing to let go before. And I, of course, champion that. It's elevated consciousness.
Agreed. Yeah. And we actually started a different practice. We call it purposeful transformation right at that point. So I'll get a little subjective and personal because it all begins with one human here. I don't know if you want to do it after the break or
Yeah,
now,
let's do it after the break because I want to expound on that. I definitely want that to have its due. So hold that thought, if you would,
okay.
Michael. Listeners and viewers, you just think about what that's going to be like hearing about purposeful transformation. Let's take our first break. I'm your host, Dr. Alise Cortez. We're on there with Michael Graber. He's the managing partner of Epic Pivot, and he speaks and publishes frequently on innovation, the power of purpose in business, and the positive influence organizations can make on the world. We've been talking a bit about where his work came from and why I think his background in art and music is so useful and informative to be able to really take us to another level. After the break, we're going to get more into this idea of purposeful transformation. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Alise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Alise to speak to your organization, please visit her at alisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Alise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Alise, send an email to Alise, A-L-I-S-E, at alisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Alise Cortez. I mentioned the latest book that I put out in March, The Great Revitalization, How Activating Meaning and Purpose Can Radically Enliven Your Business. I wrote that for leaders to be able to help them understand this new playing field that we find ourselves in post-pandemic here. And it helps you understand what the workforce really wants, and then it offers 22 best practices to equip you through leadership and new culture to actually achieve that. You can find it on Amazon or alisecortez.com. If you are just joining me, my guest is Michael Graber, who contributes articles to Inc., among other platforms, and is a contributing author to The Other Side of Growth, an innovator's responsibilities in an emerging world. He also wrote Going Electric, Tales of Innovation from Where Rock and Roll Was Born, and The Last Real Medicine Show. Okay, so let's hear about this purposeful transformation work. That sounds pretty enticing to me. You also had a couple other things in there, too, that I wanted to dig into, but let's start there.
Okay. And it dovetails nicely with the Great Revitalization. So again, I'm going to start subjective and then get into more of a macro view. So during the pandemic, I suffered, just like everybody, what I called a forced retreat, right? We had to go contemplative. We had to look inside. We had to think about things like meaning and purpose and realize that what we've been doing may not be sustainable, and then suddenly we were in the midst of three great crises. The thinker Michael Moore talked about the crisis of climate change, the crisis of the humanitarian crisis with so many refugees afoot, more than ever at the planet, and there's going to be more now, and as well as climate refugees. And then probably the most perplexing, which was the crisis of truth and meaning. We don't have an objective reality that we agree upon anymore, and how dangerous that can be, because any demagogue with any type of view can just hijack the conversation and distort fact and science and all these things we've worked so hard. And so I went deep inside and said, well, what can I do? I've made a lot of companies millions and millions of dollars by helping them innovate and create innovation platforms, innovation departments, new products, new services, new experiences. So what? that's not moved the social needle at all. And the world's only getting worse, that we're creating more stuff and polluting more waterways. And I didn't want to be a Debbie Downer. I want to fight the good fight. So at the same time, I fell in love with conscious capitalism. I got to know Raj Sodhi a little bit, did an interview with him, wrote several articles there, and then started talking to clients about these things. Simultaneously, two large clients, a very large research hospital and one of the two largest hospitality corporations in the world, came to us and they said, hey, we don't know how to handle this great resignation, and we've got all these transformations that have failed. Can you use your human-centered work, but instead of using it out on the market, use it inside our enterprise to figure out where things broke down and why? So we reverse engineered everything, and we realized that in many cases, there was never an express why. There was never a purpose or a declaration of a future state of what we're changing into. They assumed that a technology stack was going to save them. And that's the oldest trope in the world, right? The deus ex machina, right? The God in the machine. And it's not a real thing. And so from that, we then sort of right-sized them, put them back on track. And we came up with this whole methodology of purposeful transformation. But with that, we were able to then take a step back and see that the majority of the change that's needed is not going to come from governments or from nonprofits. God bless them. They've had hundreds of years, right? And we've gotten as far as we've gotten. But it's only when the private sector is going to be a force of good that we're going to be able to realize our potential as a species, because that's where the mass of people, the majority of us, spend the majority of our waking hours. And we can no longer afford to compartmentalize ourselves, as T.S. Eliot talked about in The Dislocation of the Sensibilities, to put on my work mask and not have my morals, my ethics, and just have to say this to this person, that to that person. That gamesmanship is dying. That's one reason for the Great Resignation. People could not fit in that mask anymore, right? They wanted to be real. They wanted to be authentic. They're hungry for meaning and purpose. And so we created this whole methodology around purposeful transformation. And it's our thesis that there are B Corps and there is the conscious capitalism that's really good for large companies and for others, but it's not a one-size-fits-all prescription. It can be a little bit too restrictive. And some people, some companies in particular, cannot re-govern and become a B Corp. They have to stay in S Corp, a C Corp, an LLC, whatever their governance structure may be, but they can still articulate a purpose, align both their strategy and their structure to that purpose, and move to more of a stakeholder version of capitalism instead of a shareholder version of capitalism. And we're able then to start working with companies. Just tell you one brief example. We started working with a plastics container company around the same time. We had done innovation work for them. We were writing their strategy. But then we started just getting wind of everybody inside of the company felt like they had to wear a bag on their head when they went to cocktail parties. They were embarrassed to tell people they worked at a plastics company, right? Because of the plastic backlash. And they said, well, what can we do to make people feel better about working here? So, well, you have a great culture and people are very honest, but your product's a little toxic. What if we come up with, what if we change that? And what if you're able, so we came up with a 3-horizon strategy for changing. And the first would be to help CPG clients start to minimize their input of plastic, start to really lightweight and really better palletize. And then ultimately it is to be out of plastics completely. It was a 10-year strategy. They're now about 4 years into it and doing very, very well and becoming known as the people who are very innovative around sustainability in the CPG space. But they embraced it very much as a way to move beyond their competition, as a way to strategize and flank other businesses, but more importantly, because it started to galvanize their culture, and the best and brightest in that field wanted to come work at this company. And it's been amazing. And since that time, they've won some of the largest accounts from some of the biggest global companies. And they're helping a lot of the CPG companies meet their 2025 sustainability goals already, and then helping them find cost-effective ways to move outside of plastics.
Listeners and viewers, for those of you who don't know what CPG is, what is that? Consumer packaged goods?
Yes. Thank
Just
you.
want to make sure that in case somebody's getting stuck on the acronym there.
Thank you.
You're welcome, of course. So then I do want to, since you're talking about kind of reorienting a company, I think one of the best examples that I'm personally aware of that you also reference in some of your articles is Interface, the carpet tile company. And that is such a great story. Maybe you want to touch a little bit on that, because they're a great example of really recognizing, oh my gosh, we're plundering the planet with these indestructible carpet tiles. Did a 180-degree turn on how they were making this stuff. It's such a great story.
It is a great story. And I think you hit on the highlights already, but they realized that this stuff was going to be around forever, much longer than humans will be on the planet. Right. And then beyond that it was very toxic and had all kinds of chemicals that would put things that we're not supposed to breathe into our direct environments, both office and home. And so they changed the game completely. Nobody believed that they could do it. And then suddenly they became one of the most popular carpet manufacturers anywhere by doing the right thing. So that's what we like to tell our clients, is that if you want to hold on to your best and brightest employees, if you want to outpace your competition and truly meaningfully differentiate, if you want to build a legacy and a brand that has that type of halo, and then most importantly, do well by doing good. There's a great study by Raj Sisodia that I quote all the time, that if you move to this model, we call it purposeful transformation, but this emerging model of capitalism that the world is calling us all to move to, you're going to outperform your profit-only competitors somewhere, studies say, between 8x and 13x to 1. So I just feel a little lonely on the mountaintop prophesizing this all the time when the data is so clear. I don't know why we can't get over ourselves. You know, our typical 1950s industrial revolution orientation of MBA school and how we think about business is so ingrained in how we think about these things and how we make decisions, but it can be so toxic into itself. You know, I wish we could just do a great flush and a reset, right? Reset the curriculum. But as my favorite psychologist, James Hillman says, conversation is consciousness. So it starts with what we're doing right now.
That's right. Well, first let me say, I will stand on that mountain with you, Michael. You and I can get up there and, sing, have a picnic or whatever, but I'm up there on the mountain with you too. And I loved what you wrote in one of your articles, which I just want to say it because I think it's so beautifully written. And I think it's a beacon call for those people who haven't yet made this turn. But you write, business is changing for the better. Instead of the sole goal of making money, it now wants to make money while creating significance and social value. And what I'm seeing, and you've been saying it too throughout this program, is increasingly people are expecting that, and organizations are holding themselves to an account because they see, some people starting to see that there really is utility and value and return on an investment for this stuff. It's not just really cool and nice. It actually turns a really pretty nice profit. And you and I both know that many increasingly investors are choosing to invest in purpose-led organizations than not, because they give a better return.
Yeah. And so I left out one fact about the plastics company, which is very pragmatic. And that is one reason they wanted to work with us on this purposeful transformation is that they had to recapitalize their debt. And as they shopped around their debt, they went to the largest of the large, and the large traditional conservative investment banking firms said, we'll lend you this money, but all money has strings on it now. And so you're going to have to really up your ESG game. And they decided, this is a golden opportunity. We meet so many people that are kind of cowering and fighting the ESG movement because it's something done to them and done to their model. But this company, because they're leaders, they're able to take it as a pause and say, maybe there's something here. And if we take this money, we don't want to just do the checklist. We've got to really bake it inside our whole engine and start to understand and articulate why it's important and getting to a philosophy of value. Why are we creating what we're creating? Because I can't have all my employees cower at the cocktail party being embarrassed of where they work. I've got to give them not just a PR line, but something from the heart that's going to attract other people to work here and attract other people to buy from us. So I call this a philosophy of value that many companies are starting to understand.
I love it, Michael. Well, just this morning, here's a great example on the ESG front. So every Tuesday, I run 6 miles in the cold or the heat, whatever it is, at 6:30 with my friend Charles. And today it's cold enough, and I always bundle way up. I need lots of layers. And we were talking about headbands, the ones that go over your ears especially. And he said, I just found a fantastic new headband. And he said, I was visiting in Philadelphia, and one of my nieces had it. She said it had an extra one, and so I got to use it. And she said, oh, it's double lined. He said, and then I checked into the company. I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of the company, but maybe one of our listeners and viewers will. How do they make those headbands? Is they go and get plastic bottles from the sea, pull them out of the sea, clean the sea, and then they repurpose, make them into this double layer of a headband that is incredibly warm and cozy. Now, that's where it gets beautiful. People love that story. They want to be part of that story, part of that solution. And that's, if they're going to choose where they're going to spend their money, that thoughtfulness, that consideration for the planet. This is what we're seeing more and more, that I know you and I are both compelled by, and are out prophesizing.
Excuse me. Pardon me.
No worries. Here, why don't you finish that cough? And let's get our last break here. You have a nice, good cough, and we'll come right back. Okay. I'm your host, Dr. Alise Cortez. We're on the air with Michael Graber, who contributes articles and to other such platforms. He's also a contributing author to The Other Side of Growth and Innovators' Responsibilities in an Emerging World, plus a couple other amazing books. We've been talking a bit about his whole process of purposeful transformation. After the break, we'll continue a few more stories and help you better understand just how this makes sense for you. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Alise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Alise to speak to your organization, please visit her at alisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Alise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Alise, send an email to Alise, A-L-I-S-E, at alisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us, and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Alise Cortez. Before we get back on with Michael, hope he's better now, I do want to share something interesting that came across my radar, and that is a conference called the Humanitarian Exchange. It's taking place on February 20th, 2024, and people can join either online or in person in England. And what's exciting to me about this, and maybe it's even great for this conversation, is it's bringing together purpose-driven organizations and individuals across society that are invited to really help address this humanitarian challenge we're talking about here. So in a world of escalating global crises driven by conflict and climate, like Michael was talking about, this humanitarian exchange is bringing together a million-strong people to come together to try to help address some of these issues, and you are invited to attend. So how do you find information? Go to Humanitarian Exchange, no E, humanitarianexchange.org. If you want to register, I'm pretty sure it's free. You can use the HX-priority to be able to get a little bit of a bigger bump when you actually register. So I will see you there. This to me is important to evangelize, so I hope you'll give it some consideration. If you are just joining me, my guest here is Michael Graber. He's a managing partner at Epic Pivot, who speaks and publishes frequently on innovation, the power of purpose in business, and the positive influence organizations can make in the world. We've been talking about quite a few interesting examples here, and I want to be able to finish this segment strong here with maybe some other examples and ideas that you have to really help organizations move away from this traditional way of marketing, and how do we own a market to actually serving the needs and improving the lives of the people that we're trying to help.
Right. So many people, prospects in particular, they act like it's such a revolutionary premise when I say it. But actually, if you go back to the roots of business, I'm going to quote Adam Smith. He wrote Wealth of Nations, from which we get the invisible hand of capitalism that's going to come and help take care of everybody. But 8 months afterwards, he published The Theory of Moral Sentiment, which is a book that's all about how business should take care of community. And I don't know why that's been summarily rejected. Similarly, in the MBA mindset, this is a stereotypical kind of caricature, but in the MBA mindset, people quote Darwin a lot. Survival of the fittest, origin of species, dog eat dog world. You got to fight. You got to, But Darwin only said that it's survival of the fittest 4 times, and he used the word love with different species more than 400, and most people don't. And so if you start to measure these things up and not selectively quote, something happened when education was really being standardized right after World War II, and almost what I call the Chicago School of Economics, from which we base a lot of our business theory, were in vogue, and that's became the template of how we think. But that's not even the roots of how business worked in community, in society, until that point, right? And then that up through the neoliberal era, right, through Clinton and Bush, probably set this. People think of it as an absolute truth, but it's actually not. It's just one mental model of reality. So you have to question yourself: what kind of work do you want? What kind of work do you want for your children? What kind of world can work build, right? How can work be a force of good or a healthy thing on the planet without externalities? When I hear that word, an externality, it sounds like such a strange, disembodied concept. But we do have poisoned waterways, right? We do have so much litter. Just, you mentioned the plastic in the oceans.
Yeah.
Who's responsible for that? And those are big questions.
Yeah, let's just hint, it's not the turtles of fish.
That's right. But yet it's now even in the fetuses of many types of creatures, including humans, right? All these microplastics. So it affects us all. And so when I say that, it's not a revolution I'm talking about. It's a gentle evolution that's already has many working models, from all the B Corps are out there, or the values-based businesses that there are many case studies of that outperform profit-only companies. But my favorite comes from the Basque region of Spain. With
yes,
the
you mentioned
Mondrian.
this. Yes, please.
Yeah. So there was a monk who was put in charge of one of the most impoverished regions of Spain. And he went through a dark night of the soul trying to figure out what could he do. And he said, I can't think myself out of this problem. Dear Lord, help me, right? And so finally he said, well, I've got to help these people enrich their lives and the lives of everybody around them. So he set up a cooperative, keyword cooperative, style of business, and started with one enterprise. Now it's grown into many, many corporations that are doing more than $100 billion a year. They're still extant. And guess who owns it? Everybody who works there. And for the longest time, the most junior level person, the janitor or the person on the floor in the factories, only made, or they made a good wage, but the CEO and the C-level only made 3x of what they made. Now it's up to 7x, but still that's exponentially much less than what we see in this trillionaire, multi-billionaire culture that we have these days. And it's a model that we see coming back in vogue. one of our clients that we help with a purposeful transformation actually switched their ownership. They had many offers to sell. It was a family business. They were moving into third generation, and there were private equity offers because they were doing very well. And they decided that they wanted to leave a legacy, and that was their philosophy of value. And so they restructured as an ESOP, employee stock option program. So they cashed out, they did well. But instead of just making a few multi-millionaires, they were able to make thousands of hundreds of thousandaires, right?
Wow.
And everybody prospers. And so these models are already out there, the cooperative models, the ESOP models, all these other models for wealth creation and wealth equity. And I would just encourage people to explore them.
Mm-hmm. So good. I really appreciate the breadth of models that you've been talking about in the show, because it helps people really understand that this isn't as maybe crackpots as they might originally at first blush think. And the thing that I keep coming back to, Michael, is that, and I've had many people on my show talking about this, the importance of, human leadership and, being, actually honoring the human person in the world of work. I just find it amazing that we were having that conversation in 2023. And I do think that the part of the reason that we get to have this conversation, and I'm going to say is because we are now in such a world powered by, artificial intelligence and technology, that we've now recognized as the human race that this is the one way we can distinguish ourselves. And just how important it is to be able to, as you say, the old method of innovating edits out humanity, and what you're out to do is really embrace empathy and co-creation in a way that celebrates it.
Yeah, even if I'm talking about innovation, there have been many of our clients who are feared of what AI is going to do to them. And when I go inside any of these companies, everyone's scared that there's going to be massive job cuts. Just before I got on here, I was looking at the news and I saw that one of the big tech companies is thinking about a layoff in sales because AI is going to be able to figure out a lot of what their sales strategists were going to do. They're talking about 30,000 layoffs in one of the large tech companies. I won't name them. But what's so interesting is that there's a large study from multiple universities. UPenn is the main author, but Yale and others are involved. And it said with the best of AI, it always goes to the average or the mean, right? And so if a company is really going to differentiate, key word here, they're going to have to call on human cunning, human creativity, making these uncommon, non-average connections that just aren't going to happen with a machine, right? And then you're still going to have the humans make the right inputs in the machines to get the right outputs. And so we can never really dismiss our birthright of creativity, of insight, and outsource that to robots. If you're running a bunch of different tests to try to get to some type of new drug, that's one thing. If you're just trying one molecule after another or one variation or another, that's a right and good use for it. But if you're talking about what people really need and what they want and what they'll buy, put money down, I don't know if machines are ever going to be able to answer that.
I don't. One thing that I don't either, by the way. One thing that became very apparent to me, both in my research and just, I guess intuitively, is how much experience became such an important thing after the pandemic. People wanted quality experiences. If you were going to ask them to come out to do something or try a service or product, it needed to involve some kind of a quality experience. If it was just a transaction, they were not going to be interested in that. And so I think that also speaks to how we distinguish ourselves from technology. We can provide those kinds of experiences, this kind of an emotional connection that is what people are hungry for. And so like you, I want to assuage people's concerns about AI and technology taking over the planet and all of their jobs. It does mean that we have to keep elevating ourselves and keep learning and growing and reaching, which I want you to do anyway. But it doesn't mean that you have to worry that, you're going to be in the unemployment line forever because, AI took your job.
Yeah. But you were asking about vulnerability and being human at work.
Yeah.
I can't imagine anyone expecting to stay at a job now where they're not allowed to be themselves. And it was really interesting. I spoke to the Chamber of Commerce in Memphis just a few months ago. It was an HR meeting. I talked about this emerging model of work, and all of them raised their hands and said, well, we need help. We've got positions to fill. We've got jobs, and we just can't find the right workforce, the labor force. People don't want to work. And my response was, look at your choice of language. You're still singing out of the 19th century songbook. People are not a labor force. They're people. You need to change your processes, your language, your experience for touching them, for orienting them, for persuading them to come work for you, to add value. It's not the old equation where people just have to have a job. People want to have a life, and their identities are tied in their career. And that die needs to be retooled massively in HR. Mm-hmm. As you know, that's the majority of your work, I'm assuming.
Yeah, quite right. That's exactly right. And, that's what a lot of it is gently trying to, sometimes it's not gentle. Sometimes it's, look, what's interesting is some of the marketing that I do for our company is I look for organizations that have a Glassdoor rating under 3 to reach out just to say, hey, you might want to look at something a little bit different here. You know what I find oftentimes when I go to reach out to them? They're not in business anymore.
Right.
They are not in business anymore.
Yeah.
Wake up call. Okay.
Yeah,
so completely agree, and so sometimes, a lot of what I do is especially in my speaking, it is a gentle, ideally inspiring wake up call that says, hey, come with us. This is a better way. This is the new world we live in today. Come with us. But sometimes it does require the look, man, you're about to go out of business here. Something's got to change.
Yeah, we love when clients come to us and, quote, in the psychologist chair already. They're, as they say in the 12 steps, they're willing.
Right.
Yeah, they're willing to try something, open-minded.
Try
some new mindsets, some new practices, some new behaviors. Because our addiction to the old model isn't going to help us at all. That's the first thing we have to do is unlearn in this process before we can begin to learn anew.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, that brings us to a near beautiful close here to this program here, Michael. You know that this program is listened to by people around the world who care about elevating their own experience of work, of becoming a better version of a leader that can really help satisfy the needs and wants of today's world, and people that are starting to get on that bandwagon of wanting to do business that betters the world. What would you like to leave them with?
I would say work hard and write your own purpose and really start to discern that, and then find the right environment, the right context, the right business that is going to see value in that, where it's a alignment of values. And then you'll be in a position to really thrive and help others, which is the most beautiful thing. I mean, that is why we're here, right? Is to become a boon to others.
Beautiful way to finish, Michael. I am so glad to know you and count you as a friend, as a colleague, as a comrade in this work that we're doing together. It's really a delight to know you and share you with my listeners and viewers. Thank you for being on Working on Purpose.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Alise. Yeah, lovely.
Absolutely. Listeners and viewers, you're gonna want to learn more about this remarkable man, Michael Graber, the work he and his team do at Epic Pivot and his various writings. So I encourage you to start by visiting epicpivot.com. Let me spell that for you. Epic, EPIC, Pivot, PIVOT, epicpivot.com. Last week, if you missed the live show, you can always catch it via recorded podcast. We were on the air with Dr. Ranjay Gulati, talking about his ideas and research at Harvard and helping companies to deeply operationalize purpose throughout their company to achieve new game level results. It's really remarkable, his work. His book is profound and it's well worth picking up. It's totally next level purpose. Next week, we'll be on the air with Monica Parker talking about her incredibly meaty and enlivening book, The Power of Wonder, the extraordinary emotion that will change the way you live, learn, and lead. You will learn that wonder is both a journey and a destination, a verb and a noun, a process and an outcome, and that there are 5 interlinking elements that comprise the wonder cycle. You'll also learn the extent to which you might be wonder-prone yourself. See you there. And remember, work is one of the best adventures and means of realizing our potential and making the impact we crave. So let's work on purpose.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's program. Be sure to tune into Working on Purpose, featuring your host, Dr. Alise Cortez, each week on W4CY. Together, we'll create a world where business operates conscientiously, leadership inspires impassioned performance, and employees are fulfilled in work that provides the meaning and purpose they crave. See you there. Let's work on purpose.